everyone, I'm back, and today I want to discuss another topic which a lot of my friends have asked me about, and that is designer handbags. Now, just before I get into it, I want to say a big thank you to all of those who watched my first ever YouTube video about designer shoes or heels. My nightmare was that it would probably just get 40 views, but actually it's going really strong, and I really appreciate those of you who are liking and subscribing. Thank you for your feedback and for supporting me. So designer handbags are the first ever items I started collecting. I do own quite well-known models such as the Hermes Birkin alongside Chanel from different eras, both modern and vintage. I also own some miscellaneous items such as Alexander McQueen, Balenciaga, Furler and Coach, although of course the last two aren't really considered designer items, but I do love those bags, so that's why I'm giving them a shout out. Now, in later videos, I'm going to take you through all the details of each of these models. So if you want to know a lot about Chanel, or you want to know a lot about Hermes Birkin, I'm going to feed you all that info. But for today's video, I actually want to step back and introduce you to the entire world of designer handbags. This is everything I think you should know before you start making a major purchase. This would be tips and tricks, mistakes to avoid, everything I would have told the 23-year-old version of myself who started collecting. Today, I want to cover 6 topics. How do you afford a designer bag? Can you get one for cheap? Is it true that bags are good investments? How do you make a wise purchase? How do people view you? And how do you maximize the long-term value of your bag? Now, just before I jump into everything, following my last video, my friend in Milan, Italy, fashion capital, actually reached out to me and said that next time I'm in his neighborhood, which I'm actually planning to be next year, he's going to take me around to all the major fashion outlets. So that's where you can get Dolce & Gabbana, Versace, Armani, etc. for extreme bargain prices. So I thought, you know what, if any of you guys are interested in that, pop it in the comments and I'll put you in touch with him. Financially, luxury bags do burn a big hole in your pocket, and they can also compete with all the other aspects in your life, because the reality is most things in life cost money. Your spending habits also affect your relationships. So in this first section, I want to highlight 5 tips for how to ease the financial burden. Number 1, you have to set up the mindset that purchasing designer handbags is like locking yourself into a term deposit. There's this sort of misconception that the huge amount of money you invest into a bag can be converted back into cash anytime you want it. If you suddenly want money in your hands, just sell the bag. Unfortunately, it's not that easy, and I'll explain why. So just like with the term deposit, if you try to exit it earlier than the agreed growth period, which is a year or more than a year, several years, you get penalized. There's no chance of you earning profit, and you might not even make back the original money that you put in there. And bags are very much the same. If you want to sell your bag quickly or early on in a short period, your chances are slim of even getting back the price that you paid for. You can definitely make a profit, which I will discuss later, but from the day you decide to put your bag up on a selling ad, it is normal for you to have to wait more than a year before the right purchaser with the right amount of money comes forward. Number 2. So following on from that first statement, the most obvious point I can make here is know when you should not buy the bag. Do not buy the bag if you do not have enough capital of your own money, which you're not borrowing, and do not buy the bag if your life will not be okay with that huge amount of money being locked away and being inaccessible. Point 3 is the importance of budgeting and opening up a separate bank account. It's very important that you set up some early rules, because spending habits can quickly accelerate and you get used to the feeling of making a large purchase. I'm going to use myself here as an example. When I first started, a $200, $300 purchase felt like so much money. I would spend a very long time, probably several weeks, just deliberating over it. Now that I've been collecting for almost 4 years, anything under $1,000 feels cheap. It feels like you're buying a cup of coffee or you're buying a bus ticket, and that's pretty scary. So the rules I would set up here are every week decide on an amount of money that you can save into that designated bank account without it harming the other goals in your life. Let's say that's $50. The next rule is don't buy the bag unless you've saved up enough money in that account. It could take 1 year, it could take 2 years, but make sure you stick to it, because otherwise if you're purchasing on credit, you're always spending more than what you have and you're always playing catch up to purchases you've already made. It does take a long time before that lump sum is ready to go, and so use that time wisely. Use it to research the marketplace to understand how often your bag is available, what average price it's listed at, what is a below grade and a bargain price, what is an above grade and a premium price to pay, so that when you're ready to pay for your bag, you know exactly what it's worth and you know whether you're getting a competitive deal. Number 4 is that everyday savings make huge long-term differences. There is unfortunately a misconception that anyone who splashes out on designer goods splashes out on everything in their life. Unless you're a millionaire or a billionaire, that's not how it works. You end up affording your designer bag because you don't buy coffee, you don't buy lunch outside, you buy only the groceries that are on special, you only watch movies on Cheap Tuesday. So every dollar you save every day makes a huge difference. Tip number 5 is the importance of having a transparent conversation with your partner, family or friends who rely on you financially. Buying designer bags is a lot of fun, but it's also an addiction. So it's very important that you don't let this ruin your relationship with others. What made it a lot easier for me was that the majority of my collection I purchased before I moved in with, before I got engaged, and before I married my husband. So that meant my finances were my finances and they were solely my decisions. Now that we have a joint bank account, then I have to check all my purchases with him. And what has made this work is that whole concept of a separate bank account. All the income I make from my full-time job is not used for luxury goods. However, I work on the side as a consultant for private clients, so the small money I make there, I slowly save away in that account. This means that long term, on a day-to-day basis, I'm saving up together with my partner for our holidays, for paying off the mortgage, etc. But on the side, I'm also slowly saving up for my collection, and that doesn't harm our goals. The conversation is a lot easier if your partner, family or friends appreciate designer goods and they understand the value that they hold. Fortunately, my husband is in that position. He thinks the items are beautiful and he likes to see me dressed up, because otherwise I'm plain Jane. If you think that buying designer handbags means walking into your local Chanel or Dior store and paying over the counter, then you're only scraping the surface of the opportunities and options. You can buy bags new or secondhand. You can purchase them domestically or internationally from retailers, established resellers, or individual sellers. Since there are hundreds of unboxing videos, I presume that a lot of people love the feeling of purchasing new from a retailer. And in that case, you don't really need to do much research. However, if you're like me and you want to grab yourself a bargain, then you will need to understand the marketplace. My Chanel double flap, small medium gold hardware lambskin secondhand mint condition for $2,200, and again in this exact type, exact model condition, I've seen it retail anywhere between $4,000 to $7,000. So that is just a taste of the savings you can achieve, although I will cover how I purchased them in detail in their own designated videos. There are limitations and opportunities on both ends. If you want to purchase from the boutique or retailer, you are limited to the classics and seasonal items alongside stock availability. For example, the Hermes Birkin is notorious for never being in stock. I've also heard a lot about friends who think so much and get so mentally prepared for a bag purchase that when they're finally at the store and it's not available, they just sort of give in and they do an impulse buy because it's better than returning home empty-handed. The problem with this is that over time they start to regret the bag they randomly bought in that moment, and they have to start over and save again for the bag they originally wanted. Especially if you're interested in vintage items, you have to understand the second-hand marketplace. Also for certain brands such as Chanel, it's quite well known among collectors that the vintage items are of superior quality and superior craftsmanship. So again, if this is sort of what you're after, instead of your, let's say, modern double flap, then look secondhand. Like most things in life, risk is involved, and the amount of risk you want to take is relative to the amount of money you want to save. If you want minimal risk of encountering a counterfeit, then that's why you go to boutiques and retailers, or if you go secondhand, you go to an established long-standing reseller. Now there are dozens of these. Japan is actually one of the largest secondhand marketplaces, so if you're in the country, definitely go have a look at their secondhand boutiques. Otherwise, although quite a few of their websites are Japanese only, American sites like eBay have a lot of the Japanese sellers with their shops in English, so it's very easy for you to access and understand. However, if you're like me and you really want to grab a bargain, then the slight savings presented by these established resellers will not be enough for you. They can still charge up to 90% of the recommended retail price. So the next step available is to purchase from individual sellers or small-time operators. This is where the big savings happen, and you can often get your bags at near or more than 50% off the recommended retail price. Your marketplace becomes quite vast, whether it's eBay to the app Carousel to even Gumtree. The savings come from you cutting out the middleman. At the big agencies, you've got dedicated personnel who check for authenticity and who appropriately price the bag. If you do all your research, then you can fulfill those two roles yourself. Of course, it's more risk, it's a lot of extra work. For example, for me, I feel like it takes me about a year before I'm confident enough to do it for a new bag model. But if you want real money savings, then that's the path you got to go down. You want to end up at a stage where you can tell the difference between a fake and real bag. You can tell how often that specific bag model is relisted on the marketplace. So if you missed it once, you're not going to freak out because you know it will be back again in 4 to 6 months and you'll be better prepared. You also know exactly what that bag is worth. So you know when you make an offer and you're negotiating, you know what's the line you should draw it at. I want to give you a few tangible tips. The first one is regarding money transaction. If you pay online for your bag, you should really only use PayPal. The last time I checked their terms and conditions, which unfortunately nobody wants to read, but you need to, they are one of the few agencies which will actually protect you in the case of a counterfeit. The alternative to making an online transaction is to meet up with the seller in person, inspect the goods in person so you can feel it in your hands, make sure everything's right, and then exchange money on the spot. Now, of course, that takes more time and effort. Make sure you do it in a secure, safe location. But for big purchases, that's the level of dedication you want to go. For example, I was aware that when I was about to purchase this bag, my competition was actually a buyer from Melbourne who was willing to fly all the way to Sydney just so he could hold this bag in his hands and make sure it was exactly what he thought it was through the photos. Luckily, I got there first. The next thing I want to mention is that in terms of understanding whether your product is authentic or not, and there are lots of websites, lots of YouTube videos to help you, plus I will be covering it later on as well, you need to check also the packaging and the receipt if they're available. This is why if you can purchase your bag with packaging and with a receipt, always do so. It's always worth the extra money. It means that you can purchase with less anxiety and more confidence, and you will also sell to the next buyer with more confidence, and they will be less anxious. To help yourself with authenticity, always going into the actual boutique and hold the product in your hands, so you know up close what the quality and the details look like. And also always remember there are independent authenticators out there who can help you for a small fee, so you don't have to only rely on yourself. Of course you should educate yourself, but you can always have a backup plan. Point 3 is that you should always research your seller. Sites like eBay will always provide their sales history and their feedback history. You want to look for someone who regularly sells luxury goods and regularly gets positive feedback. Point number 4 is always ask your seller for more information. Never be afraid to bother them. A proper seller will always be prompt and diligent. They know that all you're nosing about is just you being responsible. A dodgy seller does not want to give you more information. So as an example, when I have asked for more photos of the bags, I've been very careful to observe whether the background keeps changing, because if it is, it means they're just using stock photos of they're gathering over time photos of their bag from different angles which aren't actually theirs. Also, what I like to do is I like to ask the seller to write on a piece of paper their username or the date and include that in the photo. Then I know for sure the photo they've taken and the product they're showing me is actually the one I'm looking at, and it's not against stock photos. Tip number 5 I want to mention is that people who try to sell counterfeits will often label their product as vintage, and this is their way of explaining any discrepancies from the main branding that you're used to. The irony here is that vintage items basically don't have counterfeits out there, because as you're probably aware, counterfeits only exist where the demand exists. There are millions and millions of counterfeits of this bag because everyone knows the Chanel double flap and most people desire it. On the other hand, there are, I would doubt any counterfeits available of this vintage single flap or this vintage Chanel backpack, because how many people know about this bag model? And even less people are after this. Believe it or not, even though this section has been so long, I have so much more to say, and that's why I'm going to cover it under a dedicated video in the future. I just want to finish off with the option of how you can purchase internationally. And this is very tempting, especially if you live in Australia, because our import taxes are ridiculously high. So if you want to purchase internationally, always do your research as to what the tax threshold is and what your tax refund will be. I'm going to give you an example for both criterias here. In Australia, if you are importing, the tax threshold is 1,000 Australian dollars. So you want to keep the value of your import below that, otherwise you're not making a saving. Now, Jeff and I, my husband, we were on our honeymoon in London a few months back, and that's when we made some luxury purchases. We found out that for the UK, their tax refund varies between 15 to 20%, depending on which country you're from. It turned out that Australia was 16%. However, a store like Harrods actually charges a fee to prepare your custom declaration form, and that fee is relative to the amount of money you spend. In our case, they charged 3%. So at the end of the day, we saved 13% off purchases we made there. A phrase that gets thrown around a lot is that designer bags are good investments and you can make money out of it. From the last almost 4 years of collecting, I've found that this is both true and false, and I want to walk you through it today. There is money to be made from certain bag models, and you can make money if you think long term, not short term. This goes back to that whole term deposit analogy I made earlier. In its simplest form, you have to remember that a bag which is worth 10k is only worth what a purchaser is willing to put forward if you can't afford to wait for other buyers. You have to remember that not everyone just has 10k in cash lying around. Not everyone wants exactly your bag in this color, model, size, and condition. Depending on your bag model, the marketplace of buyers that you are appealing to could be very small. This is why you have to think long term, not short term. An advertisement which is aiming to attract the right purchaser at the high price that you're after will succeed. However, it could take a year or more than a year before that right buyer comes along. If you can't afford to wait, which often happens because of cash flow or financial stability reasons, then you will end up lowering the price and you will end up selling the bag at less than its real value. I have a whole range of money saving tips which I will address in later videos, but I can say that the reason I've been able to purchase the majority of my bags for far below market prices is because I'm sort of this vulture that sits about waiting, and I only buy from people who are desperate to sell and cannot afford to wait anymore. I'm not an evil, horrible person, I just like bargain hunting. If you can hold on to your bag for many years and even wait many years when you want to sell it, then yes, you will make money off that bag, but it does take patience and it takes financial stability. The other factor that determines investment return is the actual bag model. Bags which are well known and desired but expensive or limited in stock end up being the ones that flourish the most in the second-hand market. I'm referring to the Hermes Birkin and also the Chanel double flap. These two bags are very iconic. They're easily in the top 5 most well-known bags. They are both at the top tier in terms of bag pricing, and the Birkin in particular is notorious for its limited stock, where most people have to get onto a 2-year waiting list if they can even get onto the list. Apparently in a lot of cities you can't even do that. I don't want to say too much about these bags because again I'm going to have designated videos, but the Hermes is a perfect example of good investment return. So I have in front of me the receipt from the original owner who purchased it in Paris in 2014 for 8,200 euros. I know that if I put this bag up on the market today in its current condition, it can retail for up to $14,000. On the other hand, for a bag that's less well known and less desired, such as the Balenciaga Lady, which I adore, but unfortunately it has never ever cracked the market, it is unlikely to grow in significant value since very few people know about it and probably even less people desire this bag. Finally, regardless of bag model, the investment value of luxury brands is true when you think generally about the second-hand marketplace. It's very interesting to note that a bag might have passed through 3, 4, 5, 6 hands, but it will still only ever be labeled as second-hand. So from that perspective, as long as you care for your bag and you keep it in good condition, there's a limit to how far its value will depreciate. So in that case, for the Balenciaga Lady, which I purchased again dirt cheap for $650, even if I part with this bag 5 to 10 years down the track, I can probably still fetch that price or higher. That would not occur if you were selling a non-branded bag that was used for 10 years. You'd be lucky to even get $20 for that bag. After almost 4 years of collecting bags, I then went on to collect designer jewelry, shoes and accessories. What appears to be a small hobby can over time actually become a form of addiction, so this is why I do want to address it. We always think that 1 or 2 is enough, but the reality rarely is that. When I first started, I just wanted to collect the Hermes Birkin and the Chanel double flap to kind of tick a box of feminine corporate achievement. But now you can see what has happened since then. If you're in a comfortable financial position, then there's no real harm. However, if you're making serious sacrifices for your first designer purchase, then beware, it most likely won't be your last. It could be years down the track before you realize that you have bought enough or you've actually bought too much. I believe there are different elements in the process which different people get addicted to. You might love the luxurious materials, the ornate craftsmanship, the beautiful design. It could be that over time, once you get used to this level of quality, that anything which is not branded just feels inferior and you feel like everything's sort of plastic. For me personally, I sort of became addicted to the chase. As I mentioned, it takes me a year or more than a year to educate myself and watch the market looking for a bargain. And when it does come up, I just pounce on it. And the moment I own the bag, I almost feel lost because over time, I didn't get drawn to the bag itself. I sort of got drawn to this process of nabbing this incredible deal. So in this section, instead of being entirely negative, I want to raise some tips to help you curb the addiction. The first one is, if you're following my rule about slowly saving up for your bag, in that time you should simultaneously keep a list of any designer items that you're interested in. And what you should do is revisit this list in 6 months or 12 months, 18 months before you actually make your purchase. Because what you'll realize is that some of those items you've added are spontaneous. You know, you saw it in one person's outfit and you fell in love with it. But then when you really think about it, it's not your style and you wouldn't pull it off. So what you want to do is you want to make sure the bag you revisit in a year's time is still the bag you want. It's still the one where even if you've seen it 100 times on other people, it's still top on your list. At the very beginning, most likely the bags you're after will be the most popular, well-known items. I was exactly the same. And then over time, you start to find out your own style and you start to go for the bags which aren't so mainstream. If you're a collector and you don't mind your bag just sitting on a shelf, then this is a much easier process for you. However, if you actually want to get your money's worth out of your purchase, then you need to do your research about whether this bag model will suit your lifestyle. Watch YouTube videos, try it on in store, see how it feels on your body, read all the forum discussions. Factors which discourage you from using a bag frequently include the leather type. If it's fragile and it gets damaged easily, you won't want to bring it out with you. How heavy it is, how ergonomic it is to use. You know, how easy is it for you to take your phone in and out, in and out? If it's a lot of hassle, again, you won't be inclined to that bag. Price tag can be a real mental barrier. If your bag is too expensive, you won't want to take it out much because you risk every time having someone bump into it, someone spill something on it, and rain damage it, etc. Have ideas for how you're going to style your bag with your outfit casually and formally, and also understand your lifestyle. Are you someone who needs a bigger bag because you carry a lot around with you, or are you someone who wants a smaller bag because you go to dressy networking events and you want to travel light? This section is short and sweet. Designer bags can reinvent your identity. A lot of people out there, you might want a designer bag because it's fun and stylish, or you're perceived as commanding and demand respect, or you've sort of purchased a social status. Unfortunately, it does work both ways, and close friends and family or complete strangers might perceive you as materialistic, superficial, and financially irresponsible, even though I did mention in the earlier section you're probably making some significant profits. One aspect which I would like to mention is that designer goods have the capability to be passed down between 2 or 3 generations, and that's because of the higher quality materials, craftsmanship, and culture of repair. So as your bags age, you're not meant to just throw them away. You take them back to the boutique and they go through sort of a spa service where they get cleaned up and fixed. So I do really like the idea that it's not just your collection, but you're giving it to your children and your grandchildren. Once again, the mantra with designer items is long-term, not short-term. So here I want to give you a checklist of items to consider to maximize the value of your bag. Number 1 is you must ensure your bag is stored in a secure, safe location and whether insurance is required. This is very relevant if you share accommodation. Number 2 is make sure your bags are stored correctly. This There are plenty of videos on YouTube to help guide you, plus forums, but generally the rules are don't keep them in their boxes because they will get musty and moldy, which will significantly decrease their value. If you're a smoker or you have pets, make sure you keep this clean and it does not absorb any scents. Keep it always stuffed. You don't want your leather creasing, and you don't want the hardware to squash the leather either. Number 3 is always keep the packaging and receipt. Depending on the bag model, those two items can hold as much as 40% value. Just like how it gives you peace of mind when you're purchasing, then when you resell, it adds a lot of security and also saves money. You don't have to get an authenticator involved. Especially when you're traveling, saving all the original packaging can be extremely challenging. Jeff and I encountered this on our honeymoon where we had 3 shoe boxes. We had to sort of pack all our items inside the box like a jigsaw puzzle in order for us to keep the boxes with us. Number 4, this depends on your personality and how much effort you're willing to invest, but babying your bag always pays off. Avoid long sun exposure. You know, a little bit of sun is fine, but extended hours will bleach the color out of the leather. Keep your bag off the ground. You know, if it has protective feet, then it's not as bad, but again, scratches on hardware of any sort decrease the value. Therefore, you should invest in things like little table mounted bag holders. I actually lost mine, so I can't show you what it looks like. Read the forecast before you go out, so if there's any sign of rain, you're not taking your bag out. And always situate your bag at a table or wherever you are in a way where it minimizes the chance of someone bumping into it, someone spilling food on it or drinks, because someone's always an idiot. So we're finally at the end of another super long video. I think this is just my trademark. This is how I do things. But I really hope this was useful to you as a general introduction to the basics that you should know to the whole world of designer items, not just bags.